The resurrection, as you can see through here, is actually a key to understanding all of Scripture. It starts, by the way, interestingly enough, at the very, very beginning, because it says when the angels say to the women, remember what he said. He told you the Son of Man must be delivered over into the hands of sinners and be crucified on the third day and be raised from the dead. And it says, and then they remembered his words. The resurrection helped them understand Jesus' words. That's the beginning. Oh, in light of the resurrection, now the things that Jesus said aren't quite as crazy. Of course, what happens on the road to Emmaus? I think it's one of the more comedic parts of the New Testament. It's when the disciples say, I love this, it says, our chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him, but we'd hoped he was going to redeem Israel. He was crucified, and we thought he was going to be the Messiah. And Jesus turns around and says, how foolish you are, how slow to believe all the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter into glory? And it says, and beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. The resurrection, paired with the cross cross make sense and opens all of Scripture. Now, there is a fascinating, Don Carson in his book, Love of God, which is one of the 2 volumes in which he gives you a daily meditation to go along with your McShane reading, your daily reading, going through the Bible through the McShane reading calendar. I think it comes up in July, Don. There's a place where he has a meditation on Acts 9, where Paul meets the risen Christ, and he actually reconstructs what might have been going on in Paul's mind. In those 3 days when he was blind, and he'd just seen the risen Lord, what was he thinking about for those 3 days? And what Don does is he gives you what I consider an extremely revealing reconstruction of what could have happened. And here's what could have happened. Paul, the Pharisee, would have been offended by Christianity for this reason. The Messiah, by definition, is anointed. Messiah means anointed one. It means the chosen one, the loved one. A Messiah would be blessed by God. The Messiah would have the favor of God. He would please God. But here's this Jesus Christ, supposed to be the Messiah, and he's dying on a cross. Even the Romans knew that this most ignominious of deaths, the Romans and the Jews knew to die on the cross. That's the bad end of people who are at the lowest of the low. And doesn't Deuteronomy itself say, cursed is he who is hung on a tree? So, and maybe Paul didn't know about this, but if he did, it certainly would have gone along with his thinking. Didn't Jesus actually cry out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? So here's what Paul's thinking. Christianity makes no sense. Because the Messiah would be blessed by God, would be supported by God, would be accompanied by God. And this guy, Jesus, was abandoned by God. He was cursed. What kind of fool do you take me for, says Paul. What kind of salvation could a Messiah like that bring? And then he saw him raised from the dead. Uh-oh. Wait a minute. So in the darkness, he says this. Well, wait a minute. If he was raised from the dead, then God did vindicate him. Then God is pleased with him. Then God does love him and bless him. But wait a minute. If God does love him and is pleased with him, then when he was cursed and abandoned, he must have been cursed and abandoned for somebody else's sins, not his own. And suddenly he turns to the rest of the Bible, which of course Paul would have, been able to carry around in his head. And he would have looked at Isaiah and said, okay, wait, the first part of Isaiah, there's the Messiah is a great king, but the second half is all about this strange figure, the suffering servant. They couldn't both be the same figure, could they? Yes, they could. If Jesus, and then you take a look at the sacrificial system, and you take a look at the temple and the sacrificial system. Excuse me, I suddenly got louder there. And he says, okay, let's think about the whole thing. Did the blood of bulls and goats and little lambs, did that really over the years actually completely atone for sins? That wouldn't make much sense, would it? What if it was pointing to something? What if all that was pointing to Jesus? But okay, now if it's all pointing to Jesus, what does that mean about the temple and sacrificial system? And then let's take a look at Ezekiel and Jeremiah. Look at those places where it talks about a new covenant, where it seems like God is actually talking to people face to face and writing the law on their hearts. It's almost like there's no need for a priest or a temple anymore. What is that new covenant discussion about? How do we understand that? If Jesus, then that makes sense. If Jesus, then that makes sense. If Jesus, then that makes sense. What about the promise to Abraham? That through Abraham's descendants, all of the nations of the world would be blessed. How would that ever happen? You see what's going on? Once he understood the resurrection, he understood the cross, paired together. And once he understood the resurrection and the cross together, he looked back and the whole Bible opened up to him.